This aircraft is not built for short flights or quick strikes. It is built for endurance, for journeys that last not hours but days, missions that cross oceans, stretch across continents, and circle the globe. It flies deep into enemy territory, undetected, unseen, unstoppable. When it launches, it does not just carry weapons. It carries responsibility, the kind of responsibility that can shift the balance of power in a single moment. Think of what that means. A B-2 does not exist to fight the battles of today. It exists to prevent the wars of tomorrow. Its presence alone reshapes the choices of nations. It is not just an aircraft. It is a message written in steel and shadow. We can reach you anywhere, anytime. Yet here is the truth almost no one considers. For all its advanced technology, for all the billions invested in stealth coatings and composite materials, the real weapon of the B-2 is not its design. It is not its invisibility. It is not the bombs locked in its belly. The real weapon is the human spirit inside the cockpit. Because what use is a perfect machine if the people flying it are not strong enough to endure its demands? What use is stealth if the pilot behind the controls cannot resist fatigue? You will see no sunlight. Your world will shrink to the size of a cockpit, where every sound, every vibration, every flicker of a gauge matters. The hum of engines will become your heartbeat. The glow of instruments, your only daylight. You cannot rest. You cannot drift. One mistake, and the mission fails. One hesitation, and lives could be lost. It is here, in this crucible, that the B-2 spirit reveals its truth. The aircraft itself is only half the story. The other half is the pilot, the woman or man who must carry not just the weight of the mission, but the weight of history. Because every B-2 mission is more than a flight. It is a promise. A silent pact between pilot and nation. I will endure what others cannot. I will fly where others will not. I will guard the fragile balance of peace. This is what makes the B-2 more than a machine. It is a test of human will. The stealth technology may make it invisible to radar, but the spirit of the pilot, that is what makes it unstoppable. Imagine this, a lone figure inside a cramped cockpit, surrounded only by the soft, steady glow of blinking controls. Outside, there is no sunrise, no sunset, only an endless stretch of darkness covering the skies. The clock ticks, 1 hour, then 10, then 20, yet the pilot cannot rest. He must stay sharp, precise, perfect, because one lapse, one moment of weakness, and the mission collapses. This is the world of the B-2 spirit pilots. Men and women who are not only battling enemies across oceans, but are also locked in combat with the most dangerous foe of all, their own exhaustion. Think about it. 44 hours without rest. No break, no comfort of solid ground, no human voice beyond the headset. Only the hum of jet engines, the pounding of a heart that cannot slow, and the weight of knowing that their mission may alter the fate of nations. These flights are not adrenaline-filled adventures. They're the razor's edge between collapse and resilience. Fatigue. It creeps in like a silent predator, not only draining the body, but gnawing at the mind. The eyes ache to close. The brain begs for sleep. Yet the pilot pushes on, fueled by discipline, by training, by the knowledge that quitting is not an option. Darkness. It is more than the absence of light. It is isolation, loneliness, the endless void at 50,000 feet, in the silence of the skies. Every second stretches into eternity. The pilot is forced to confront not only external threats, but also the shadows within. Fear, doubt, vulnerability. And yet, it is in this crucible of fatigue and darkness that the spirit of B-2 pilots shines the brightest. They know there will be no cheers when they lift off, no applause when they disappear into the night. But every decision, every breath, every sleepless hour in that cockpit is a silent promise to hold the line, to keep the balance of a fragile world intact. This is not just the story of a stealth bomber. It is the story of human endurance stretched beyond its limits, of courage born in silence, of resilience forged in shadows. The B-2 Spirit. At first glance, it looks less like an aircraft and more like a shadow stretched across the sky. A sleek, black triangle that seems to swallow the light around it. It is not just a plane, it is an icon. A machine worth billions of dollars, designed with one purpose: to go where no other bomber can go, and to strike where no enemy expects. For decades, the B-2 has been the crown jewel of American air power, a symbol of strategic dominance, a weapon whispered about in war rooms, a ghost in the sky that radar cannot touch. But to understand the B-2, you must first understand its mission. Consider this. During a 44-hour mission, fatigue is inevitable. The body begs for sleep. The mind begins to wander. Doubt whispers. Fear lurks in silence. Yet the pilot must resist. Not for minutes. Not for hours. For days. This is the battle no one sees. Not the flight itself. Not the radar evasion. But the war inside the human heart. To keep going when every muscle screams to stop. To stay sharp when the mind begins to blur. To face the emptiness of the skies and the weight of responsibility. And still remain unshaken. That is why when people speak of the B-2 Spirit, they often forget the second half of its name. Spirit. It is not a name chosen by accident. It is a recognition that technology alone is not enough. What gives this aircraft its true power is the spirit of those who fly it. It is their discipline, their endurance, their refusal to break, even in the face of exhaustion and isolation. The machine may be invisible, but their courage, their resilience, that is what the world feels, even if it can never see. So yes, the B-2 is a marvel of engineering, a billion-dollar ghost that slips through the shadows of the night. But strip away its technology, and you will find something even more extraordinary. You will find a pilot who is willing to fight fatigue and darkness for 44 endless hours. You will find a human being who is willing to become more than human, if that is what the mission demands. And that is the real weapon of the B-2 Spirit. Fatigue. It sounds like such a simple word. But for the pilots of the B-2 Spirit, fatigue is not a passing inconvenience. It is an enemy, a relentless predator stalking them from the moment they leave the ground until the wheels touch back on the runway. 44 hours. That is almost 2 full days. 2 sunrises. 2 sunsets. And yet, for the pilot inside the cockpit, there is no sunrise. No sunset. Only time stretching endlessly forward. The body begins to protest first. Muscles stiffen. The shoulders ache from holding position too long. The legs grow numb from lack of movement. The eyes sting and burn. Desperate for a moment of rest, a second of relief. Every blink becomes a battle. Every breath, an effort. Now imagine performing at the edge of perfection while your body screams to stop. Every switch you touch, every command you enter, every decision you make, it must be flawless. There is no margin for error. None. Because in a B-2 Spirit, one mistake is not just a slip of the hand. It can mean detection, exposure, mission failure, lives lost. And so, the pilot fights on. But fatigue is clever. It does not only strike the body, it attacks the mind. Slowly, patiently, thoughts begin to lag. What was once instant now takes seconds. A simple calculation feels heavy, like dragging chains through the dark. The brain craves rest, craves silence, but receives none. And so it begins to whisper, just close your eyes, just for a moment. Let go. You cannot keep this up. This is the danger. Not missiles, not radar, but the quiet voice of exhaustion, urging surrender. The cockpit becomes a battlefield, not between pilot and enemy fighter, but between pilot and his own biology, between human limitations and human will. Every yawn is a reminder. Every slump of the shoulders, every lapse in focus is an opening. Fatigue pushes harder. It gnaws at confidence. It erodes discipline. Yet here, in this crucible, training takes over. Because a B-2 pilot is not just taught to fly. They're taught to endure. Their bodies conditioned, their minds sharpened, their habits drilled until they become second nature. They know fatigue will come. They expect it. They prepare for it. Discipline is their weapon. When their mind says stop, they answer with procedure. When their body says rest, they answer with focus. When fatigue whispers quit, they answer with silence, and they keep flying. It is a brutal process. Imagine holding yourself at the edge of sleep for hours on end. Imagine staring at the same blinking lights, the same endless black horizon, knowing you cannot look away, not even for a second. Most of us struggle to stay awake in a classroom, in a meeting, behind the wheel of a car. But in the cockpit of a B-2 Spirit, drowsiness is more than dangerous. It is lethal. And yet somehow, they endure. Fatigue, you see, is like a shadow. At first it is small, manageable, barely noticeable. But as hours pass, it grows. It stretches. It covers everything. Endure more than the body should allow. There is a moment, sometime after the 30th hour, when fatigue becomes almost unbearable. The body trembles. The mind drifts. And yet the pilot steadies their hands, locks their focus, and whispers the only word that matters: continue. It is in that moment that the human spirit reveals its strength. Not when the flight begins, when the engines roar and adrenaline surges. Not when the landing is complete and relief floods in. The true spirit of the B-2 pilot shines in the dead middle of the mission, when there is no end in sight, when the weight of hours already flown threatens to crush them, and yet they press on. Fatigue is an invisible enemy. It cannot be seen on radar. It cannot be tracked or destroyed with weapons. But it is there always, and fighting it requires no missiles, no bombs, no technology. It requires willpower. That is why every B-2 mission is not just a test of the aircraft. It is a test of the pilot. A battle fought not in the skies, but inside the mind. Every successful mission is proof. Proof that endurance can outlast exhaustion. Proof that discipline can silence the whispers of weakness. Proof that the human spirit, when tested, can carry the weight of 44 sleepless hours and still prevail. And so, the story of fatigue in the B-2 Spirit is not a story of weakness. It is a story of victory. A story of human beings who stand unbroken against the one enemy every person must face: the limits of their own body. The cockpit becomes an island, floating in an endless ocean of shadows. The instruments glow faintly, a fragile reminder that you are still tethered to the living world. But outside, there is nothing, no light, no sound, no sign of life. And in that nothingness, the mind begins to wander. This is the first meaning of darkness, the literal night, the absence of light that hides both the pilot and the plane. It is what gives the B-2 its greatest advantage. Hidden, silent, invisible, the darkness is their shield, but it is also their trial. Because in that same darkness lies isolation. Loneliness so complete that even the hum of engines feels like company. The headset crackles now and then with a distant voice from command. But it is not enough to fill the silence. It is not enough to drown the truth. The truth is, in that moment, the pilot is utterly, completely alone. Every decision rests on their shoulders. Every calculation, every maneuver, every correction. There is no audience to cheer. No team to share the weight. No applause when they succeed. Only silence. Endless silence. That is the second meaning of darkness. Not the absence of light, but the absence of recognition. The absence of comfort. The absence of human connection. Imagine it. Flying at 50,000 feet. Hours into the mission. The world below invisible. The sky above impenetrable. You are cut off, suspended between earth and stars. And in that space, you begin to feel smaller. Smaller than you ever thought possible. This is the psychological weight of the mission. The cockpit becomes less a workplace and more a chamber of solitude. Every sound is amplified. Every silence, deafening. Time moves strangely. Seconds stretch. Minutes drag. Hours feel like days. And still, you must stay sharp. Because the darkness outside may feel empty, but it is not safe. Somewhere in that void, could be danger. Radar, interceptors, the unseen hand of the enemy. And so, every choice matters. Every adjustment of course. Every flick of a switch. One error could betray the mission. One hesitation could turn the shield of darkness into a grave. That is what makes the experience so merciless. Darkness is not just a setting. It is an adversary. It presses down on the pilot. It demands courage, not in the face of fire, but in the face of silence. Not against explosions, but against emptiness. Not against fear of death, but against the deeper fear of being forgotten. Because unlike the fighter ace who duels in daylight, or the soldier who charges in a battle under the eyes of comrades, the B-2 pilot fights unseen. Their courage is quiet. Their victories invisible. Their struggles unrecorded. No medals are pinned for staying awake in the dark. No parades are held for crossing the skies alone. And yet, these missions shape the fate of nations. So what keeps them going? Not glory, not recognition, but resolve. The resolve to keep flying, even when the cockpit feels like a prison. The resolve to keep deciding, even when the weight of those decisions feels unbearable. The resolve to keep trusting, even when trust is the only thing standing between them and despair. This is where the true spirit of the B-2 pilot emerges. Not in combat, not in fire and noise, but in stillness, in silence, in shadow. They face the darkness, and they do not look away. They let it surround them, press against them, threaten to consume them, and still they remain unbroken. There's a strange kind of beauty in that, because in the deepest night, the smallest light shines brightest. A glowing switch, a steady heartbeat, a voice in the headset saying, "Continue the mission." These fragments of light are enough. Enough to keep them steady. Enough to carry them forward. And perhaps that is the secret. The darkness is not just an enemy. It is also a teacher. It strips away everything that is unnecessary. It removes comfort, applause, distraction. It leaves only the pilot, the machine, and the mission. And in that stripped-down silence, courage is revealed. True courage is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not shine under spotlights. True courage is the kind that survives in the dark. So when we speak of B-2 pilots facing the darkness, we must understand what that means. It means flying through endless night without falter. It means enduring loneliness so heavy it feels physical. It means making choices in silence, knowing no one will ever see the weight they carried. Darkness is both shield and trial. It hides them from the enemy, but it also hides them from the world. And in that paradox lies the essence of their spirit. To fly invisible, to fight unseen, to endure uncelebrated. This is the courage of the B-2 pilot. And it is in that unseen courage, in that quiet defiance of the dark, that the true spirit of the B-2 lies. There comes a moment in every mission, a moment when the fatigue feels unbearable, when the darkness presses so heavily that it seems to choke the air itself, when the body pleads to surrender, and the mind whispers that it has given enough. For most people, this would be the end, the point of collapse, the point where exhaustion wins. But for the B-2 spirit pilot, this is where something extraordinary begins. Because in the very heart of fatigue and in the deepest stretch of darkness, the human spirit ignites. Quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. This is the paradox of the B-2 mission. The more the world strips away, sleep, comfort, light, recognition, the stronger the will inside the cockpit becomes. It is as if the absence of everything only sharpens the presence of one thing: resolve. And that resolve transforms the ordinary into the unbreakable. Think about it. These pilots are not superhuman. They're not immune to pain or fear or weakness. They feel every ache, every shiver, every sting of exhaustion. They are as human as any of us. But what sets them apart is choice. The choice to rise when their body screams to fall. The choice to decide when their mind begs for rest. The choice to keep faith with their mission, even when the world outside offers nothing but silence. It It is not technology that sustains them in those hours. Not the radar, or the stealth, or the billion-dollar wings stretched above the clouds. It is something older, something deeper, something that no machine can replicate. It is spirit, and that spirit is unbreakable. Imagine the moment. The pilot is hours into the mission, muscles stiff, eyes raw, the darkness outside absolute. Every nerve whispers, stop. But then comes the reminder, unspoken but unmistakable. The mission must go on. Lives depend on it. Nations depend on it. So they tighten their grip. They steady their breathing. They call on the discipline drilled into them through endless training. And somehow, against every instinct of body and mind, they continue. This is the essence of endurance. Not the absence of weakness, but the refusal to let weakness decide the outcome. And here lies the truth. What makes the B-2 formidable is not its invisibility to radar. It is the invincibility of the human while guiding it. Because no matter how advanced the aircraft, it is still flesh and blood that keeps it alive in the sky. It is still courage, invisible yet indestructible, that turns metal and fuel into a weapon of strategy. There's a quiet nobility in this. Unlike the soldier cheered in the streets, or the fighter ace celebrated for his kills, the B-2 pilot operates in silence. Their triumphs will never fill textbooks. Their sacrifices will rarely reach headlines. They will never hear applause. And yet they fly. They fly knowing that their names may never be spoken, that their courage may never be acknowledged, that their endurance may never be celebrated. They fly because the mission is greater than themselves. This is the heart of the unbreakable spirit, doing what must be done, not for recognition, not for glory, but because it is right. It is a strange kind of heroism, a heroism that does not demand witnesses, a heroism that does not need an audience, a heroism born in silence, carried in shadows, and buried in secrecy. And yet, it is perhaps the purest form of courage we know. Because what could be stronger than giving everything, every hour, every heartbeat, every ounce of strength, and asking for nothing in return? This is how ordinary people become extraordinary. How men and women with the same limits as us, the same frailties as us, rise beyond those limits. Not because they are stronger, but because they refuse to surrender. The cockpit becomes their crucible, the darkness their test, the fatigue their adversary. And through that trial, their spirit is refined, hardened, made unbreakable. And when the mission is over, when the wheels finally touch the runway, there will be no cheering crowds, no bright lights, no grand ceremony. There will only be silence. But within that silence lies something greater than applause. It is the knowledge that they endured, that they carried the mission, and with it, the weight of nations, that in the darkest hours, they did not break. And that knowledge is enough. Because true strength does not need witnesses. True courage does not need a stage. The B-2 spirit may be a marvel of engineering, a symbol of American power, a machine designed to alter the course of history. But its true power does not lie in steel or stealth. It lies in the spirit of the human beings inside it. Spirit that does not collapse under exhaustion. Spirit that does not falter in darkness. Spirit that does not yield to despair. Unseen, uncelebrated, unbreakable. That is the legacy of the B-2 pilot. And perhaps that is the legacy of humanity itself. The B-2 spirit is a marvel of engineering. A flying wing that slips unseen through radar. A billion-dollar silhouette designed to shape the balance of power. To the world, it is the ultimate symbol of stealth, precision, and strategy. But here is the truth. The most powerful part of the B-2 cannot be measured in steel, or fuel, or technology. It cannot be tracked by satellites, or captured in photographs. It cannot be locked onto by any radar. Because the true power of the B-2 lives inside the people who fly it. The pilot's spirit, the will that refuses to break. The courage to endure fatigue and darkness, hour after hour, mile after mile. That is something no enemy can detect, and no machine can replicate. Think about it. The B-2 is designed to disappear, to move unseen through skies, across continents, above oceans. But the spirit of its pilots does the opposite. It leaves a mark that cannot be erased, not on the radar screen, but on history itself. For while the world sleeps, while cities glow with the comfort of peace, there are men and women awake in the cockpit of a B-2. They carry the burden of silence. They hold the balance of nations on their shoulders, and they do it knowing that most of the world will never know their names. That is the paradox of their mission. Their success is measured in what does not happen, the wars that never begin, the threats that never become reality, the balance that quietly holds. And yet, without them, the balance would break. In the end, it is not the stealth that keeps the peace. It is not the jet engines, or the nuclear payload, or the wings stretching across the night sky. It is the human will inside that cockpit. The quiet promise, I will endure, so others do not have to. This is their legacy, a legacy carried not in medals or parades, but in silence, in shadows, in the unseen victories of a world kept in fragile balance. And what lesson does that leave for us? That true strength does not always roar. It does not always shine in the light. Sometimes, true strength is invisible, quiet, hidden in the shadows. The pilot of a B-2 teaches us that technology may create the stage, but it is the human spirit that performs the act. Machines may shape the battlefield, but it is human endurance that shapes history. Fatigue can weaken the body. Darkness can isolate the soul. But willpower, the refusal to give up, turns weakness into resilience, turns silence into strength, turns shadows into legacy. And maybe that is what we're meant to carry with us. Not just the image of a stealth bomber vanishing into the night, but the reminder that every one of us, in our own battles, faces fatigue, faces darkness, faces moments where surrender feels easier than endurance. And in those moments, the lesson of the B-2 pilot remains. We are stronger than we think. We are braver than we feel. We are capable of more than we imagine. The B-2 spirit may be a machine of war, but the spirit of its pilots is a testament to peace, endurance, and the unbreakable resilience of the human heart. So the next time you look up at the night sky, remember, somewhere, out there in the shadows, there may be a lone figure in a silent cockpit. No one cheering, no one watching, yet carrying a mission that holds the weight of a world. And that legacy, though born in darkness, will never be forgotten. History remembers the victories we can see, the battles where flags were raised, the speeches that echoed in daylight, the parades that marched down crowded streets. But not every victory is born in the light. Some are written in silence, in shadows, in the places where no applause will ever be heard. The story of the B-2 pilots is one of those victories. Men and women who sit alone in a cockpit, suspended above the earth, fighting enemies most of us will never see. Their war is not only against threats across oceans, but against fatigue, against isolation, against the crushing silence of darkness itself. And yet, they endure, not for glory, not for recognition, but because the mission demands it, because the world depends on it, because history, fragile as it is, must be protected, even if no one ever knows who stood guard. That is the paradox of greatness. The greatest victories are sometimes invisible. The bravest warriors are often the quietest. The strongest acts of courage may never be witnessed at all. Think about it. 44 hours without rest, alone in the darkness. No sunlight, no audience, no comfort of home. Only the hum of the engines, the glow of the instruments, and the weight of responsibility pressing on tired shoulders. And still, they do not stop. This is not just the story of a stealth bomber. It is the story of the human spirit, of how far endurance can stretch, of how deep courage can go, of how the will of one person can become the shield for millions. The B-2 spirit may be a machine, but its true spirit lives in the people who fly it. People who transform darkness into duty, fatigue into discipline, silence into legacy. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. That strength is not always loud. That victory is not always celebrated. That some of the most important battles we fight in life are the ones no one else sees. We all face moments of fatigue. We all walk through seasons of darkness. We all know the way to silence. But it is in those very moments that we discover who we truly are. Do we surrender? Or do we endure? The pilots of the B-2 show us what endurance looks like. They show us that courage is not about recognition. It is about responsibility. That greatness is not about applause. It is about persistence. That legacy is not about light. It is about what we choose to do when no one is watching. So the next time you think of history, do not only remember the parades and the speeches. Remember the shadows. Remember the silence. Remember the men and women who held the line, unseen, so that the rest of us could live in peace. Because in the end, the greatest battles are not won in the light. They are won in the dark, by people who ask for nothing in return but the chance to fulfill their duty. And now, I leave you with a question. Do you believe that in history, the greatest victories have been written in the shadows, by people whose names the world will never know? If you do, then join us. Leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, and do not forget to subscribe, so together, we can continue uncovering the stories that history keeps hidden. Stories of resilience, stories of courage, stories that prove, again and again, that the strongest spirit is often found where no one is looking. Because in the end, it is not the light that defines us. It is what we choose to do in the darkness.